there are quite a couple of risks to talk about. The most obvious risk is that you try and implement some form of new technology and you later on find out that it was the wrong choice or you took a long time to implement, and you're going to waste quite a lot of money. Now, the not so obvious risk is that you may be losing some opportunity because you're focusing on implementing some technology where you could have actually spent your time much more productively on something else that's much more conducive to the business. Perhaps one of the most understated risks and really a huge problem that we see quite often is that as soon as projects actually do start failing, everybody loses confidence and trust in that technology could really be utilized for business value. And I think that's probably one of the biggest risks. So you're probably referring to what we call the 4 value propositions of IT, which is part of our relevant IT framework. To make it easier to understand, let me just focus on 3 of those. The 4th one is fairly advanced and it's just going to make it quite difficult to understand. The principle is that businesses need to utilize technology better for business value, and they need to start seeing the different ways that technology could add value. Now, the foundational level, which we call the value proposition 1, is about how to use technology to build your platform, to build your environment. How do you make sure that you have really computers that are stable, access to your data, security, all of those basic building components, and how do you make sure that that really is a modern platform? That's your value proposition 1. That's your traditional techie or IT people would give you. Now, further from that, and which we call value proposition 2, is about where you change over and you start thinking about, okay, how do I use that technology to optimize and automate my business process? Now, as soon as you go to that level, you start realizing that that's not really techie type language anymore. Now you're starting to talk about how do I take a recruitment process or a financial process or any form of business process, and how do you make sure that instead of a business process taking so long, using technology in such a way that it becomes shorter and better quality. Now that's the second potential value proposition that IT has for a business. The third one is, and built on top of that, is where you utilize an entire platform and you start using technology to differentiate your business. So how could I develop an application? How could I do something specific for my customers that's going to make my business stand out? Now, with all of those 3 distinct value propositions, quite important to notice that you build them up from the bottom to the top. Many organizations in South Africa nowadays have a fairly reliable and cost-effective IT platform, but very few organizations are moving to the next level and saying, well, how do I now make that technology work for my business? And even fewer are going to the 3rd level where they say, well, how to differentiate my business using technology? We believe that all businesses are going to have to focus on all 3 if they want to continue being successful. Okay, so the first thing to really notice when talking about PoPI is that there's a lot of uncertainty and doubt, and people are probably looking at it from a completely wrong perspective. Now, what we need to understand is that if you look at PoPI purely from a checklist point of view, and when you say, okay, well, I need to now protect the data, etc., you're probably missing the point. It's very important to realize that PoPI really requires an organization to move out of just seeing technology for technology's sake and starting to look at how do I treat information as part of my business. Now, as soon as you start using those words, you start realizing that PoPI is really relevant at the value proposition 2 layer. It's about business process, about risk management, it is about reputation management, it's about data management, all these sorts of business process in an organization. So what PoPI really starts doing, it's not preventing us from using any technology, it just forces us to think a little bit more about the type of information about our customers that we're collecting and starting to make sure that those processes are properly managed. In the old way, really, and if you go to many organizations, you'll find that data is not really treated properly. So it happens quite easily that somebody just takes a spreadsheet with the entire customer database, puts it on a thumb drive, takes it home to work on it. And that is a real risk because that data could be lost. So the real risk to PoPI, to PoPI compliance, etc., is not so much the legal implication, but more the reputation risk. You're going to lose customers. And it's a very, very good thing if PoPI now forces organizations to start thinking about, let's move to the next level. It's a very important question and something that we are really battling with, because many people still out there, they just see technology as something that happens in a silo somewhere in the business. So the first real advice that I would like to give people is to start thinking about technology in a different way and saying, technology is probably my best bet to make my company much more productive in the future and make my company actually live on past the next 5 years or 10 years. So that awareness has to be raised at a business level in all of our organizations. Fortunately, we're seeing much more awareness now than we have seen 5 years ago. So there's generally lots of media, lots of talk about how can technology help your business. So awareness is starting to happen. Now, perhaps one opportunity that I could mention to you is that we've developed a sort of a simulator which allows almost anybody to really start understanding the effects of digital disruption in an organization. So you can access it by going to www.xuviate.com/digital/disruption/simulator. And by playing that, it only takes you 2 minutes. You're going to get a real good feeling of what could potentially happen to your organization if you don't start embracing technology. So awareness is the first part. The second part, and that's probably a little bit more difficult to really implement in smaller organizations, is the realization that these 3 value propositions that we spoke about are so fundamentally distinct from each other that you would probably require different people to get the value from those value propositions. So the normal techie, the IT person, that's value proposition 1, that's about the platform. But as soon as you start talking about how do I optimize my business process in technology, that person is not really the right person to do that work. So it requires organizations to start realizing that essentially every person, every leader in the organization should potentially be a technology person. And people really suited for that role to optimize business processes are normally the CFOs, the chief operating officers, anybody with a more sort of process-focused and process-focused mindset. And this person now needs to start understanding that it's not just about doing things like they did in the past, but trying to use technology in a different way. So trying to figure out how do we get IT out of the silo, looking at the 3 value propositions and saying who in my organization is best suited to really deliver the value, and then to have these people work together as a team. Now, one of the best ways we've found for small and medium businesses to start leveraging technology better is by having their technology leaders and across the different value propositions work with other people in the industry that are similar. So we, for example, as a company, have launched mastermind groups where we put between 8 and 12 people of a value proposition. So let's talk about IT, for example. So the IT leaders in organizations, we put them every 2 weeks together in a facilitated online group discussion. And we drive that group discussion, and the purpose of those meetings is that instead of having the IT people and the leaders like only work in their organization and being very isolated from really what happens around them, have them come together in that group and start talking about what is it that they need to do, what can I learn from other people out there in the industry, and how can I bring all of that sort of thinking into my own organization. And that has been very popular. And one of the reasons why it's so popular is because it's very low cost, doesn't require a lot of effort to really participate in those meetings, and just learning from others what they have done and what failed could really help you to avoid many costly mistakes in your own organization.